Hello there. Welcome to Whispers.exe, where the silence watches back. The following story is a work of fiction created for atmospheric and entertainment purposes. Before the shadows whisper your name, hit that subscribe button. With that being said, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the dark settle in. It begins like most things do, quiet, unnoticed, and far too late to stop. Tonight's story is She Comes in Dreams, but Leaves the Door Open. I haven't changed the sheets. Even now, after all this time, I still wake up in the left side of the bed, as if she's curled on the right, knees tucked close, breathing soft and measured like tide water. She used to talk in her sleep. Tiny things, nonsense, mostly. But once, she whispered my name with such clarity, I sat up thinking she was wide awake and staring. That was years ago. She's gone now. But she comes back in dreams. Every night. It started a week after the funeral. A silence had settled into the apartment, the kind that didn't just linger, it pressed. I thought the grief would harden into something I could hold. Instead, it dissolved into fragments of memory, each one snagging on the edges of sleep, and that's where she found me. In the dream, we're always in the apartment, but it isn't quite right. The walls stretch longer than they should. The ceiling fan is always still, and light spills in from no particular source. She sits at the table, smiling. Her eyes catch mine like they always did, deep, knowing, and somehow sad. We talk. I don't remember the words when I wake up, but in the moment I understand them. Like a language I only speak while asleep, it feels warm, safe, like coming home. But then, without fail, she stands, walks to the hallway, and steps into a fog that shouldn't exist, white and endless. She disappears into it, slowly, and I try to follow. Every time, and every time, I wake up, alone, always just out of reach. It became a pattern, a nightly visit. My body would tire just to see her, to hear her laugh, her footsteps down the hall. Even knowing it would end in that same departure, same pale mist, same empty hallway. But something changed. It was subtle at first. The table would be crooked, chairs missing, her hair slightly longer than before, or darker, as if borrowed from a different memory. One night, the doorknob to the hallway was missing. Another night, I noticed there were no windows. And the fog, it was creeping closer. She walked into it, yes, but now it spilled back out, coiling into the room, touching the edges of the dream like water slowly rising. I told myself it didn't matter. What mattered was that she was there, that I could see her, hold her hand for a moment. That was enough, wasn't it? Then came the night I didn't wake up. I remember everything from that one. That's how I knew something had gone wrong. She was at the table again, but this time she wasn't smiling. She looked apologetic. Not at me, at something behind me. I turned, and the apartment was deeper, the hallway longer. Doors lined the walls, ones I'd never seen before. Each was slightly ajar. Each one hummed a low, almost imperceptible vibration in the bones. I looked back at her. She was already standing, already stepping into the fog, already vanishing. But this time, I didn't follow. Not at first. I stepped toward the doors instead. I don't know what made me do it. Curiosity, maybe? Or the creeping sense that she was leading me to them, not away. I opened the first door, inside, my childhood bedroom, but wrong. All the toys were facing the wall, and the bed, empty, but dented, as if someone had just been there. The second door led to the church, the one we married in, but the pews were gone. Just rows and rows of folding chairs, each one occupied by a faceless figure, breathing in unison. Third door, our old apartment. The one before this, the one she hated, and she was there, back to me, humming a tune I couldn't place. I whispered her name. She didn't turn, just raised a hand, a single gesture. Stop. When I blinked, the door was shut, locked, and the hallway behind me was gone. Only forward now. Endless doors, flickering lights above, and the fog trailing along the seams of everything. I kept walking. I don't know how long, there's no time in dreams, not really, but each step felt heavier, like walking through water. The shadows along the walls began to whisper, not words, just syllables, half-finished thoughts, cut-off laughter, crying that reversed into silence. And then a mirror, standing at the end of a hallway, crooked and tall. It reflected nothing, just fog, endless, pulsing fog. I stepped closer, and it changed. Now it showed the apartment, my real one, the bed untouched, the air still, me, sleeping, but not alone. Something stood near the bed, a shape, thin, long-limbed, no face, no motion, just watching. And on the mirror's surface in condensation, a message appeared. Not written by hand, appeared, as if breathed from within. She comes in dreams. And then, beneath it, but leaves the door open. I turned, and every door behind me was gone. The hallway narrowed, the mirror cracked, the shape in the reflection turned its head, slowly, deliberately, toward me. I ran. No direction, just away. Every step sounded wrong, like it echoed before my foot touched the ground. The lights above burst one by one, until darkness swallowed all, except the fog, always the fog. And her voice. Not words, but humming. That same lullaby she used to hum in the kitchen when she thought I wasn't listening. I followed the sound, not out of hope, but because it was the only thing that didn't feel borrowed, didn't feel false. The humming led to a single door, no knob, just a small crack. Enough to see a hand, her hand, fingertips tapping lightly, almost, waiting. I pressed my hand to the door and whispered, "I don't want to chase you anymore." The humming stopped, the door opened, and she was there. Whole, wearing the same blue dress she wore the night we met. Her eyes were clear and filled with tears. "I waited," she said. "So did I answered. And then everything unraveled. Not violently, gently, like waking up from a fever. The hallway dissolved, the shadows melted, the fog folded in on itself. And I awoke, in bed. The right side still empty, but different, lighter somehow. The clock read 3:17 a.m. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and just as I stood, a knock at the door, 3 soft taps. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The hallway was dark, still, silent. Another knock, then a voice. Soft, familiar, just one word. I stepped forward, the doorknob was cold. My fingers curled around it, hesitating, holding. And just before I turned it, a final whisper behind me, low and fading from the bedroom. She comes in dreams, but leaves the door open. The doorknob turned with an almost imperceptible click, and for a moment everything held its breath. The hallway beyond was unchanged, dim, undisturbed. But cold air spilled in as if the threshold separated 2 seasons, and in the center of it, her, standing barefoot in the hallway light, eyes wide, shimmering in the dark. Her hair clung damply to her face as though she had walked through mist to get here. Neither of us spoke. We just watched. And in that silence, I saw the outline of her, real and unreal, solid and soft, like a dream that hadn't quite finished unraveling. She stepped forward, 1 foot into the apartment. The light behind her flickered, once, then steadied. I should have asked something, how she got here, where she'd been, if she was real, but no words came. Only breath, shallow, quiet. Her hand reached out, and as her fingers brushed my chest, I felt it. Not warmth, not cold, but familiarity. The kind that doesn't announce itself, only lingers, tucked into the corners of memory. "You waited," she said again, but this time it wasn't a question. And all I could do was nod, because something inside me, something older than language, understood. The apartment dimmed, not from power loss, not from time, but from her presence. Like she absorbed the room just by being in it. Every object around her lost focus. Edges softened, sounds dulled. She stepped further in, walked past me without another word. Each step left no sound, as if gravity made an exception for her. I turned, watched her move down the hallway, and something pulled at me, a strange panic. Not fear, but the quiet ache of knowing this too might vanish, that if I blinked, if I looked away, she might be gone again. She paused at the doorway to the bedroom, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something just beneath the silence. Then gently, she pushed the door open. The room inside had changed, subtly but unmistakably. The bed was made, the curtains drawn. A candle on the nightstand flickered, though I hadn't lit one, and the mirror, the tall one in the corner, no longer showed my reflection, only hers. But even in the mirror, she didn't look at me. She stared forward, expression unreadable. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. I stood in the doorway. Something kept me there, some invisible thread between decision and hesitation. Her eyes finally lifted, met mine, and her voice, gentle, nearly inaudible, cut through the stillness. "You have to let it end." I didn't answer, couldn't, because I didn't understand what she meant. Or maybe I did, but couldn't accept it. She looked down again, at her hands, and when she spoke next, it was quieter. I wasn't supposed to stay this long. The air shifted, the temperature dropped, and with it came the sound. A low, crawling hum that seemed to move through the walls, as though the building itself were holding back a breath. I didn't open the door, she said. I left it open. I stepped inside, sat beside her, our shoulders almost touched, but not quite. Her profile was sharp in the candlelight, beautiful, timeless, but her eyes, they were fading, like smoke dispersing in slow motion. You can't follow me anymore, she said. I closed my eyes, because hearing it out loud was worse than dreaming it, worse than chasing her into endless fog, worse than waking up alone. It was never the dream, she whispered. It was the refusal to wake. The hum outside grew louder, a pressure behind my eyes, as if something immense was approaching, something ancient, watching, waiting. You let me go once, she said, almost pleading, but then you chased, night after night. I shook my head, but she reached for my hand, held it lightly, as though she wasn't sure it would last. You think I came back, she said, but you never stopped dreaming. The candle flickered, then flared. The shadows around the room sharpened into impossible angles. They leaned, listened. Her hand gripped mine tighter, and her voice trembled. You left the door open, too. Suddenly I remembered. The first night I saw her. The dream, the table, the fog. But what came after the waking moment? The hallway light was on, the front door cracked open, only slightly, but open. And then, each night after that, the knocks, the soft footsteps, the lullaby humming from empty rooms. I had never fully woken. Not really. She stood again, this time slowly, reluctantly, as though it hurt. I have to go, she said, and this time I didn't move, didn't protest, didn't chase. She stepped into the hallway, and the air behind her seemed to collapse, fold inward. I followed only with my eyes until she reached the door, the real one, the one she knocked on. She paused, looked back one last time. Her face wasn't sad, wasn't joyful, just still. Close it, she said. Then she turned the knob and was gone. Silence returned, heavy, but not oppressive. Not like before. I stepped forward, slowly, and with a hand that barely shook, I reached out. Closed the door. The click echoed, and the pressure lifted. The apartment felt normal. Dust in the corners, soft hum of the fridge, faint glow from the streetlights. I walked back to the bedroom. The candle was gone, the mirror still cracked, but my reflection had returned. I climbed into bed, laid on the right side for the first time in years. The sheets were cool, the pillow unfamiliar. But I breathed, and with each breath, the world steadied. That night, I didn't dream. No fog, no footsteps, no humming in the walls, just the rhythm of my own heartbeat. And in the quiet between that rhythm, a knock. Once, then again, and again. I didn't move, didn't get up, didn't answer. Eventually, it stopped. The door stayed closed, and I slept, for the first time, truly. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, when the shadows fall long across the hallway, I think I hear her voice, just barely. She comes in dreams, but not mine, not anymore. And I leave the door closed every night, even when it knocks, even when it whispers, even when it pleads, because I finally understand she left the door open, but I was the one who kept walking through it. Not anymore. Not anymore. Sometimes in the blue hour just before dawn, I wake up with the shape of her still pressed into my memory. Not her face. That's the first thing that faded. But the shape of her presence, the weight of her sitting on the edge of the bed, the hush she carried like a veil, it lingers like perfume long after the person has left the room. I don't dream of her anymore. Not really. But there are echoes. Dreams where I'm walking endless corridors again, but now they're empty, silent, no doors, no whispers, just the sound of my own footsteps in dust that never stirs. Once I saw a version of her at the end of a hallway. She didn't move, didn't turn, just stood there unmoving, like a painting hung too far away to ever study. I didn't chase, I stood where I was, and eventually she faded. Even awake, her absence lives here. It's in the coffee I no longer make for two. The second toothbrush I threw away, but still leave space for on the sink. The closet still half full but untouched. Grief is strange. It makes time stretch, slows everything down. Every creak in the floorboards, Every shift in the wind, it all holds too much meaning, too much memory. And yet the world outside forgets quickly. People stop asking how you are, stop bringing food, stop calling just to check in, because time moves for them. But in here, behind this door, time folded like paper, bent into corners she used to stand in. There are nights when I hear footsteps outside, soft, bare, too light to be neighbors, too slow to be imagined. They stop just outside the door and wait. I don't open it. I used to press my ear against the wood, used to strain for breathing, for humming, anything. But now I sit quietly and let the silence do the listening. I've started journaling again. It helps. When I write, it feels like I'm speaking to her, not the dream version, not the fog walker, but her, the one who sat beside me on stormy nights and read aloud until the power came back, the one who cried when she laughed too hard, who left half-drunk teacups in every room, who hated the sound of ticking clocks. So I keep the clocks digital now. No ticks, no hands, just numbers slipping forward in silence. I write her letters, not to send, just to say the things I never said or the things I say now only to the air. I tell her about the neighbor's new baby, the way he cries at exactly 3:10 a.m., like an alarm clock set by grief. I tell her about the ivy creeping across the balcony, how it's strangling the railing, but I let it grow. She would have liked that. I even told her when I got rid of the old couch, the one she hated, the one that creaked when you sat too hard and always smelled faintly of dust and regret. She would have smiled. There's peace now. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. A quiet acceptance. I still lock the door every night, double check it, feel the knob to be sure. And every morning I check again, not out of fear, but out of habit. Because for a long time that door meant something. It was a bridge, a threshold, a crack in the world where something waited. Maybe it still does, maybe it always will, but it waits for someone else now. Not me. I remember the last time I truly heard her voice, not the echoes, not the whispers behind the walls, but her voice, soft, clear, final. You can't keep both. I didn't understand then, but I do now. I had to choose between remembering her and staying with her. One would keep me alive, the other would keep me dreaming. So I remembered and I let go. There's strength in that, I think. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that sits with you in the stillness and doesn't flinch, the kind that lets the fog roll by without stepping into it. There was a night, months later, when I stood at the door again. Just stood. No dreams, no visions, just the hallway. And me. I opened it, just a crack to see if it still felt different, if the air would shift, if something would stir. It didn't. Only darkness. Empty. Unassuming. The kind of dark that belongs to midnight, not to her, not to anything else. I closed it and smiled, because I finally believed it. She was gone. And it was okay. The apartment doesn't feel haunted anymore. It feels like a place I live, not a place I wait. Sometimes I play the old music she liked, the records with the scratches, the ones she swore sounded better ruined. And sometimes I cook the meals she never got to teach me, fumbling through half-remembered recipes and tasting salt when I shouldn't. She's still here, but not in the way I thought. She's in the burnt toast smell that lingers too long, in the books left open to the same page for weeks, in the garden gloves I keep, even though I don't garden. And when I sleep, it's deeper now, without edges, without chase, dreamless most nights. But when I do dream, it's never of her, not directly, just a shape walking away in fog, and me not following, just standing still, breathing, letting the mist pass, and sometimes, at the very end of the dream, I hear a door close, softly, firmly, finally, and I wake, and the world is exactly as I left it. I live, I breathe, I write, and I let her rest, wherever she is, beyond the fog, beyond the dream, with the door finally closed. There are mornings when the silence feels unfamiliar again. Not hostile, just unfamiliar, as if something had shifted slightly in the night, something too quiet to hear, too soft to name, the kind of change you feel only after it's passed through. The apartment creaks more than it used to. Wood settling, I tell myself, but there's a pattern to the creaks sometimes. Too slow for the wind, too spaced out for plumbing. Almost like footsteps, almost like pacing. I ignore it, mostly. I've begun opening the curtains again, letting the light in. It stains the walls gold in the late afternoon, and for a moment the rooms feel almost sacred, not haunted, not grieving, just still. There's a strange comfort in knowing I survived it. The slow erasure, the way she slipped through my fingers every night like breath on glass. I survived the weight of her absence and the gravity of her return. But the mind is strange. It doesn't forget what it was trained to expect. So even now, when the kettle whistles, when the hallway lights flicker just once, when I hear humming from the apartment below, my first thought is always her. Even if just for a breath, even if I no longer believe. I saw something last week. I was walking back from the market, arms full of things I didn't need but didn't want to return home without. And across the street, in a window that shouldn't have caught my eye, she was there. Not her, but someone with her posture, her silhouette, standing in a room too dark for anyone to be inside without light. I blinked, and she was gone. I told myself it was reflection, a trick of shadow and exhaustion. But the rest of the walk home, I kept hearing that old tune in my head. The one she hummed while cooking, that lopsided lullaby with no real melody, just rhythm. I don't hum it anymore. I stopped months ago. But that night, I caught myself whispering it as I brushed my teeth, as if it had crept back in through the cracks. The door remains shut, always. I check it twice before bed now, once for safety, once for peace. But that night, I stood in front of it again, hand on the knob, listening, not for knocking, but for breathing. There was none, only the still hush of an apartment sealed tight. Still, my hand lingered, longer than it should have. Then I turned away, because I knew if she was going to come back, she wouldn't knock. She never needed to. Sometimes I wonder, what would happen if I opened it again, just once? Would I find the hallway empty, the building asleep, or would the fog have waited, patient, forgiving? I don't test it, because letting go once was nearly impossible, and some doors, once opened again, refuse to close a second time. Grief teaches you how easily you can be undone. Dreams show you how willing you are to be undone again. But healing teaches you restraint. The art of sitting still while the world whispers your name from behind every closed door, and not answering. Not any more things I still carry. The scarf she left on the back of the chair, the book with her notes in the margins, the recording on my old phone, her laughter, muffled and far away from a beach trip I barely remember. Uh, I don't play it often, but I don't delete it either. It stays where it is, a quiet artifact, not a wound, just proof that she existed, that we happened. Time doesn't erase, it buries, layers upon layers, until memory becomes excavation. But I dig less now, let the layers settle, let the dust be what it is. Some mornings I wake up and forget what her voice sounded like. Not the dream voice, her real voice. It used to break me, now it only aches. A soft, dull ache, like a phantom bruise. I've started sleeping with the bedroom window open. The wind moves through the apartment like breath. It carries the sound of passing cars, distant laughter, wind chimes from 3 floors down. It feels alive again. Not haunted, not waiting, just breathing. And sometimes when I wake in the early hours, when the sky is pale and the world is just beginning to stir, I think I hear her footsteps in the hallway. Not walking away, not approaching, um, just pacing, back and forth, back and forth. But I don't open the door, I don't rise. I let the moment pass like fog on a morning lake, gone before you can grasp it. And I whisper one thing, just one, every time: rest. Not for me, for her, because she was always the one who stayed up too late, always the one who wandered the halls at night, always the one who left the door open, not as invitation, but as memory. And now she doesn't have to anymore. Just a crack, just enough, not to invite, not to chase, but to remember, to honor, to breathe. So if one day, in some distant dream I've long forgotten how to hold on to, she passes by again, she'll know. I'm not waiting, but I never stopped loving her, even now, especially now. The days blur now, not with sorrow, but with the gentle repetition of living. I water the plants. I sweep the floor. I answer emails with small, polite words. I take walks in the evening when the air is cool and smells faintly of jasmine from the neighbor's garden. I wave at people I don't know and forget their faces before turning the corner. Life is quiet, honest, and that I've learned is its own kind of miracle. But some nights still bend differently. They carry weight, not grief exactly, but gravity. You feel it in your bones before your mind notices. The hush is deeper, the shadows stretch longer, and even your reflection seems to hesitate as if it's not sure it should follow. Last night was one of those nights. I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, just restlessness. That old feeling of something unsaid pressing against the edges of silence. So I got up, wandered the apartment like I used to when the dreams were still fresh and cruel. But this time, there were no hallucinations. No fog slinking beneath the door, no knocking in threes, only stillness and the faint hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the kitchen table, lit a candle out of habit more than need, and stared into the flame. It danced differently than I remembered, softer, slower, as if mimicking breath. And then, without ceremony, I spoke to her, not out loud, not in any deliberate way, just thoughts unformed, sent into the space where she used to be. Are you watching? I asked. No answer, of course, but the flame leaned sideways for a moment, as if nudged by something unseen. I smiled, not because I believed it meant anything, but because it reminded me of her. She used to believe in signs, cardinals on windowsills, flickering lights, the way dreams repeat until you understand the message. I never believed, not really, but I let her tell me about them. Let her wrap her theories in warmth and coffee breath. And sometimes I pretended to believe, because her wonder made the world feel lighter. I miss that, the way she could make silence feel like a held hand. I reached for the candle then, tilted it slightly to see the wax gather and drip, and in the reflection of the flame, just for a heartbeat, I saw her, standing behind me, not in the mirror, in the glass of the darkened window. No features, no expression, just her outline, the tilt of her head, the curve of her shoulder. I turned quickly. The room was empty, of course, but the air, it felt warm, like she had just left. I didn't chase, didn't speak, just sat with it, let it pass through me like wind through open curtains. And in that stillness, I understood something I hadn't before. She never left because I let her go. She left because she trusted me to stay, to remain in the world we built, to continue, to live. That was the purpose of the dream, the corridor, the doors. Not escape, but return. Not reunion, but release. And now, on nights like this, when the silence leans in, curious and gentle, I feel her less like a memory and more like a foundation. Not something I reach for, but something I stand on. I cleaned out the closet yesterday, finally. Folded her clothes with slow, reverent hands, each one a chapter, a sentence, a moment that once carried breath and movement and her. I didn't cry, not because I'm over it, but because I've accepted that some grief doesn't need tears to be real. Some grief is just love that's learned to hold still. I kept one of her scarves, the one that still smells like her. Or maybe I only think it does. It sits in the drawer now, folded neatly, not as an altar, just as a reminder, a quiet keepsake. There's dust on the top of the bookshelf now, and fingerprints on the windows I haven't cleaned. And that's okay because the world continues. And so do I. Some days I still catch myself waiting, at crosswalks, at the coffee pot, in dreams I forget too quickly. But the difference is, now I know I'm waiting for nothing, and that is its own freedom. There's a bird that nests on the balcony rail. Small, quiet, brown feathers flecked with white. It watches me sometimes as I read by the window. And when it flies away, it never looks back. Just goes. I used to find that sad, now I find it sacred. Leaving without goodbye. Trusting the place you left to carry on. Trusting the one you love to keep breathing, even in your absence. That's what she gave me. Not haunting, not memory, but trust. And I live up to it. Every day, every breath. Even now, as I sit in this quiet room, with the door still shut, with the windows open to let the night in. Even now, I live. Not because I've forgotten, but because I remember, and that remembering, That is the truest form of love. She doesn't visit anymore, not in dreams, not in reflections. She doesn't have to, because I'm no longer chasing, and she no longer needs to be found. There's peace in that, a deep, echoing stillness that stretches across the apartment and settles into the corners where grief once bloomed. I light a candle each evening, let it burn until the wax folds over itself, let it whisper as it dies, not as a vigil, but as a reminder. That light can exist without voice, without touch. That presence doesn't need form to be felt, and that love, the real kind, leaves the door open only until you're strong enough to close it yourself. And I did close it, not with finality, not with bitterness, just with quiet, with care. Like placing a book back on the shelf after reading the last line, knowing you'll carry the story with you long after the pages fade. It doesn't creak anymore, the door. I think that matters. For a long time, every movement, every sound, every shift in the woods seemed to cry out for her, to remember, to echo. Now, it just rests, closed, still. There's a kind of hush that follows healing, not silence born of sorrow, but the stillness after a storm has passed, where the air smells different, where the world seems cleaner somehow, but softer too. That's how I feel now, like someone who lived through something enormous and survived without needing to make noise about it. There are people who try to bring her up, old friends who remember her laugh, or the way she'd press her fingers to her lips when thinking, like holding in a secret. They speak her name softly, watching me, measuring the weight it still carries. I let them share their memories, smile when it feels honest, go quiet when it doesn't. Because grief doesn't need to be explained, it just needs space. And love, real love, doesn't die with the person, it remains, changes shape, grows roots in places you didn't expect. Sometimes in sorrow, sometimes in joy, sometimes in the quietest of habits. I still set the table for two sometimes, not every night, just when the weather feels the way it used to when we'd sit by the window and talk about nothing. I'll pour her tea, watch it steam, and then pour it out before it cools. Not as ritual, not as mourning, just as a gesture, a nod to what once was. I've come to believe that grief is a house you live in, and at first every room reminds you of absence, of what's missing. But with time, you redecorate, repaint, you change the lighting, and eventually the house feels like home again. Not because you've erased them, but because you've learned how to live with the echo of them in the walls. You sleep easier, dream less vividly, breathe deeper. And sometimes you open a drawer and find something of theirs you forgot, a ring, a note, a photograph with bent edges. And instead of collapsing, you smile. That's when you know. That's when you understand the door wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The threshold between longing and remembrance, between chasing and cherishing. She taught me that, not through words, but through absence, through the leaving. She was always good at that, saying more in silence than I ever could with all my noise. I wonder sometimes if she knew, if, even at the end, she understood what would follow. The dreams, the fog, the feeling of being watched in sleep, or if those things were only ever mine. Manifestations of what I couldn't let go of. I'll never know. And I think that's the point. Some questions aren't meant to be answered, they're meant to be lived with, gently. I went back to the beach recently, the one from the recording, the one where her laughter floats in with the tide. I stood in the same spot, closed my eyes, and listened. Not for her, just for the sound. Waves, wind, seagulls, children laughing in the distance. But beneath all of that, deep in the quiet curve of the surf, a memory stirred. Not her voice. Not her face. Just a warmth in the chest. The kind that says, yes, you were loved here. And I was. And love doesn't end. It changes address, moves quietly from person to memory, from memory to presence, from presence to something even deeper. Now I carry her not as weight, but as rhythm, as breath, as light. And when I walk through the apartment, the hall no longer feels long, the corners no longer hold shadow, the mirrors reflect only me. Whole. Still learning, but whole. There are no more knocks, no more footsteps behind the door. If she comes now, she comes as wind through the curtains, as birdsong at just the right moment, as the urge to laugh when nothing's particularly funny. And that's enough. Because I've stopped looking, stopped following, stopped reaching. I've started being. And that, I think, is what she waited for. Not for me to forget her, not for me to stop hurting, but for me to step away from the threshold, to return to the world of the living, to wake up fully. And I have. I wake up with the sun on my face now, open the window and let the air in, make my coffee strong, take it black. I sit by the window, watch the day begin, and I think this is what the dream was leading me to all along. Not her, but me, finding myself in the silence she left behind. And finally closing the door. And in closing it, I found the quiet wasn't empty. It was full. Full of the things I'd missed while staring through the fog, the ticking of time, the soft sigh of fabric shifting in a breeze, the subtle rhythm of my own breath, steady, unremarkable, alive. The world didn't change when I let go, but it came back into focus. It became mine, again. Even the shadows feel different now. Not ominous, just honest. Darkness that belongs where it falls, not summoned by grief or haunted by memory. There's a comfort in not fearing what lives in the corners, only dust, only quiet. Some nights I still sleep with the lamp on, not because I'm afraid, but because I like the way the light spills softly across the room, like a memory that's chosen to stay gentle. The dreams, when they come, are smaller now, quieter, not labyrinths or fog, not corridors lined with locked doors and impossible mirrors, just images. Her hand in mine on a park bench, the two of us walking beneath orange trees in spring, the warmth of her cheek against mine during the final moments of a forgotten song. They don't end with her leaving anymore. They don't end with me chasing. They end with waking. Simple, soft, without loss. That too feels like love. I've started writing again. Real writing. Not letters to the dead, but stories that build and breathe. She used to say I had a quiet voice, even on the page, that I made people feel like they were being told a secret. Maybe that's what this has all been. A secret I was keeping from myself. That it was never about holding on, it was about learning how to be held by what remains. The memory, the love, the ache that softens with time until it becomes part of the way you see the world. Colors are richer now. Green's more green, sky more endless, even the rain feels more honest. I walked through a downpour last week without an umbrella, soaked to the bone, laughing like I used to when we had nothing but time and the long road ahead. She would have teased me for it, called me a poet trying too hard, then kissed the rain off my lips. It's strange, the things we carry, how they reshape us over time. Not all at once, but slowly, like water smoothing stone. There are scars I'll never explain, corners of myself I'll always associate with her absence, but they don't hurt the way they used to. They're not wounds anymore. They're maps, paths I walked to get here, to now. And now is good. Not perfect, not always easy, but good. I don't wait for her voice in the dark. I don't flinch when the door rattles in the wind. I don't check the mirror twice before turning away. I live. I breathe. And sometimes, in the late hours when the city quiets and the walls lean in with memory, I light a single candle and I let it burn. Not for her, not anymore, but for me, to remember that I survived the storm, to remember that I walked out of the dream, to remember that she left the door open and I chose to close it. And still she lingers, not as shadow, not as fear, but as warmth in the quiet places. A familiar pull when the wind moves a certain way, a sudden calm when my heart stutters with old sadness. That's how I know she's at peace, not because I feel her presence, but because I don't need to. I went to sleep early tonight, no dreams, no fog, just the soft stretch of blankets and the weight of a full day behind me. And just before sleep took me, I whispered to the room, I love you, not expecting an answer, not needing one. Because love doesn't vanish, it doesn't end, it changes shape. It becomes the quiet that holds you up when everything else falls away. And sometimes, if you listen closely, really listen, you'll hear it breathing with you. In the hush between thoughts, in the stillness just before sleep, in the steady rhythm of a life no longer waiting. That is where she lives now, not in the dreams, not in the hallway, but in the life I chose to keep living. And that is enough. Tonight the sky is clear, the kind of deep, endless black that makes you feel very small and very awake. No clouds, no wind, just the stars, sharp and silent, suspended in their ancient stillness. I step out onto the balcony, barefoot, a mug of something warm cradled between my hands. Below, the city hums faintly, but up here it's quieter. There's a stillness that clings to the air like dust on forgotten furniture. I breathe it in, and I let it stay. I close my eyes, tilt my head back. Somewhere far away, a dog barks once, then falls silent. In the apartment behind me, a light flickers before steadying, and I think, not for the first time, how strange it is to feel peace where sorrow once lived. I think of her sometimes when the sky looks like this, not with pain, but with a kind of reverence, a hush in my bones that says, yes, she was here, she mattered, she changed the shape of my world. And though the door is closed, the echo of her passing through it still lingers like the scent of rain on pavement, not a haunting, a memory. Inside, the candle has almost burned itself out, the wax low, the wick tired. But it's enough. Its glow reaches just far enough to warm the wall beside the window, casting a soft arc of light that moves when I shift my weight. I stand there a while, listening, not for her, just for the quiet. And in the quiet, a knock, soft, 3 times, measured. I don't move, not at first, because even now, after all this time, some part of me still listens differently when it comes from the other side of that door. But my body is still, my breath steady. The knock does not come again. I set my mug down, walk back inside. The carpet cool beneath my feet, the air heavier now, like dusk has crept in and settled in the corners. I stand in front of the door, the same one I used to wait by for hours, the one I once feared would never truly close. And I place my hand against it, not to open it, not to test the lock, just to touch it, to feel the boundary. And from the other side, a whisper, so faint it might have been imagined, might have been nothing more than my own exhale turned inward, but it said, I'm proud of you. A warmth floods my chest, not a rush, just a slow, deliberate kind of warmth, like light pushing through cracks in a wall. I lean my forehead against the door, eyes closed, and I whisper back, I know. Then I turn away. The candle flickers once, twice, then goes out. I do not relight it. Some things are meant to end gently. In the darkness, I find the bed by memory. Lie down without effort. The sheets pull around me like the arms of something I no longer fear. And for the first time, the very first time, I sleep without dreams. No corridors, no mirrors, no fog. Only quiet, only breath, only the steady beat of a heart that has made peace with its own silence. And when the morning comes, when the sky spills gold through the curtains and the walls remember how to hold warmth again, I open my eyes to a world that feels new, and I rise, and I live, with the door still closed behind me, and the light ahead.